A very warm welcome to the channel. Today is the 22nd of December 2024, and I did find this on the internet and I really wanted to share with you 15 things or 15 rules when you defend China. And I found this quite amusing because it does really happen, especially if you're speaking to a pro-China propagandist who says China is great and America is bad, which we covered countless times. So let's go through this without any further ado. Number one, you don't know China. When you are talking about China and they would ask you, have you been to China? If the answer is no, then you don't know China. But quite simply, you can have Chinese friends who do live in China or have lived in China, and they will tell you all about it. It works both ways, though. If you think about it, that the Chinese person possibly has never been to America or England, but will always criticize it. So this is the one-way policy that they think of. It. You don't know China, you've never been there. What do you know? But have you been to America, example? The US is a 1,000 times worse. And again, I covered this quite often on my channel, where they would say, oh, look at the infrastructure in China. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at the subway in China. And compare it to an old picture from New York City 20 years ago. Then they would go on, leave China alone. Yeah. Fix your own country. And then they would go on about America, saying about the military. You have 800 bases around the world. China only has 1 or 2, or maybe more, but we don't really actually know about it. So fix that and have less military, spend more money on the people. Well, China does exactly the same, but just in a smaller version of that. So fixing countries, yeah, absolutely agree. But why don't we fix it globally? Become friends instead of competitors. Western anti-China evil biased media. You will hear quite often the Western media this, the Western media that, the BBC is bad, CNN is bad, ABC is bad. But the Global Times in China is the best in the world, where it only reports the truth. Now, if you ever go to the website of Global Times, you can easily do it on, just do a Google search and you'll find it. It will only have propaganda and only positive things. Anything negative, it does have, but it would be like the second or third page. It wouldn't be the headline. So, for example, what happened in Germany is a really sad thing over the last couple of days, as an example. In China, that would be the second page, and it would always be about Xi Jinping. So Chinese media is very different to Western, where the Western media will tell you what's happening in their point of view. But Chinese media is controlled by the state and will only tell you the positive and what they're allowed to talk about. Example, if Xi Jinping had diarrhea, they wouldn't talk about it. It'd be an absolute no-no. The CIA is paying you. I've even had this one quite a few times. That how much is the CIA paying you to do the propaganda about anti-China? It's just the truth. And a lot of people, like myself, we don't get the information from Western media. We go to the Chinese websites, we go to Chinese influencers on X, Twitter, and see it from the Chinese perspective. Western propaganda, we sort of covered that before. We lift 1 million people out of poverty. They would say this in a way that 800 million people they have lifted out of poverty. Yeah, the World Bank claims this and it's fine. But this started from the 1980s. This is sort of like 44 years old now. And that is a remarkable achievement. But how they make it sound is of the government now in the last 3 or 4 years have alleviated poverty. But they haven't alleviated all. And some of the Chinese influencers who live in China, who come from England, for example, would say there's no homeless people. But again, you can go to Twitter, you can type in China poverty, and you can see a real video from real China of what is happening there. China is humanistic. Why would they mention that if something isn't really happening? They would talk about Xinjiang quite a lot and the Uyghurs and what's happening there. Now, there may not be any physical proof or evidence, but who are you going to believe? Someone who does false claims all the time, or a Uyghur who has family there? And there seems to be 1 million of these people on the social media in the West. China rise, US scared, need to talk shit about us. China's rise, it has, and the China rise is because of the West. If you go back to 1979, when China basically opened up its borders, America, Europe, England, for example, all decided to help, giving a helping hand. And it couldn't have risen without the Western help, which they seem somehow to forget. Racism. They talk about this quite a lot, but here's an interesting fact. If you talk to a Chinese person jokingly in a light-hearted way, I've done this quite often, and say, let's say you studied in Nairobi in Kenya, and you came back to China with a African boyfriend and say, Mum and Dad, I want to marry this guy. Your mum and dad would go absolutely crazy and berserk because of the racism in China. Nowadays, you could say, if you're in New York, it's perfectly normal to see a Chinese guy with a American wife, or a African American with a Caucasian. It's normal. In China, this would be quite rare, and they still have racism there. It's a more polite and light-hearted one that you would say, but it's weird. Put it like this. My auntie in the 1960s, she did go to Africa, and she did marry 2 African guys. So I have 3 cousins who are, I don't know the correct word, but they're half black and half white, so to speak, a mixture. Sorry if I'm being impolite, but you know what I'm trying to say. There, which is weird in the 1960s, but my grandfather accepted this with open arms. Very strange, but that's how it is in China. They're still sort of like, no, you can only marry a Chinese guy, and it's possibly you can marry a Caucasian guy, but anyone who would have a different color skin, then it's sort of like looked down upon. Democracy is Hippocratic. They would say that democracy doesn't work, but even though this is the whole thing, democracy is in the constitution of China. So it's, what are you talking about? Democracy obviously does work, but they are maybe scared of it. The next one, I don't know what they're talking about. And number 14, we Chinese people don't take this shit. What shit? Chinese people, they do want to go and study overseas. They do actually love Donald Trump. We've shown it on our video here. So they're scared of the dictatorship of China. If you say something bad against the Chinese government, then you are going to take this shit because you don't have any choice. Unfortunately, I hope one day this will change and something will happen dramatically that realize that communism period doesn't work. But at the same time, if you think of Vietnam, where it is a capitalist country, but it is still a communist country, the same as here as in Cambodia. China never started any war, unlike US. Well, this is a complete and utter lie. Look at Tibet, where they invaded in the 1940s, I think. Look at Inner Mongolia, when Mongolia used to be one country. Look at India, where they had these land disagreements between India and China. Look at Vietnam. they did try to invade Vietnam in 1979 and failed miserably. So when you do watch YouTube, or maybe you do meet someone pro-China, he would use one of these 15, guaranteed. And I just wanted to share this today on here on my channel. I think that's about it. I will wish you a happy day, and I will leave you with something I found quite amusing that I found on Twitter, when policemen are actually stealing people's mobile phones. I don't know the reason for it. Maybe it's to do with make sure you keep your mobile phone safe and how easy it is to steal a mobile phone. And God bless all. Thank you very much for your time. Here's the video. Bye-bye for now.